This week, Joseph Carson from Delinea is with us to discuss how Estonia built and protects their digital society. Then Lisa Plaggemier from the National Cybersecurity Alliance joins us to talk about using behavioral science to achieve cybersecurity goals. Finally, in the enterprise security news, Drata lands an epic $200 million Series C and maintains unicorn status. Germany says using Microsoft 365 is illegal in the EU. Russia may consider cybersecurity firms helping Ukraine as legitimate targets for retaliation. ChatGPT triggers an explosion of experimentation. Could this be the start of the AI revolution we've been promised for so long in InfoSec? Ireland thinks we should work less, and France just thinks you should be more fun at work. All that and more on this episode of Enterprise Security Weekly.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we talk security vendors and aren't afraid to name names. It's Enterprise Security Weekly.
Don't leave the door open. Secure your APIs with the Curity Identity Server. Curity allows you to centralize identity management policies with a solution developed by an expert team using well-established standards. Curity facilitates scalable security for apps and websites by offering a unique combination of identity and access management with API security. Protect your users, secure apps and websites, manage API access. Start your free trial today at securityweekly.com/Curity. The shift to remote and hybrid work over the past 2 years has accelerated application development on cloud infrastructure. However, securing these new assets has lagged behind. Qualys CloudView, the next generation of cloud security posture management, delivers an end-to-end multi-cloud security and compliance solution encompassing the entire application lifecycle from build to runtime. CloudView enables enterprises to assess their cloud security and compliance posture, identify risks and gaps, auto-remediate issues, proactively enforce best practices, and prove compliance in audits rapidly and efficiently. Identify your most vulnerable cloud assets by visiting securityweekly.com/Qualys. Welcome to Enterprise Security Weekly and a happy Pretend to be a Time Traveler Day. This is episode 299, recorded on Thursday, December 8th, 2022. I'm your host, Adrian Sanabria, and joining me is the Master of Marketing, the Mayor of Mayhem, Tyler Shields. How are you, Tyler?
I am doing excellent, thank you. But I do have a question. How do you pretend to be a time traveler? Does that mean you don't actually travel in time? You just go around your normal time and tell people you're a time traveler?
Well, you don't tell people you're a time traveler, so there's actual recommendations on this. I think my favorite is you walk up to random people and say, "What year is this?" And when they tell you, get quiet and then say, "There's still time," and run off.
How about just owning and driving a DeLorean?
Yeah, I suppose there's a lot of different ways you could do it. I've actually seen people spend a lot of time and money on some pretty good looking movie builds. There's like a whole community around the Mr. Fusion and like all the little bits and baubles and pieces you need to make your car look like the car from the movie.
I love it.
Dave Kennedy has done a pretty good DeLorean build.
Yeah,
of
Dave Kennedy did one.
It looks impressive.
Yeah, it's in the second build phase, so he's building it again. Just had to repeat.
Wow.
Yes.
Yeah, so. I imagine there's lights and there's probably sounds too. I've not seen one in person.
It's impressive. I haven't seen it in person. I've seen the videos. Yeah.
Yeah. Or you can simply do, Adrian, you can do what my parents used to do just to kind of make the kids a bit crazy, was they used to go and change all the clocks in the house. To different times. So we'd go to school early. We'd go to school early in the morning just to be on time because we don't go very late.
It's like micro pretend to be a time traveler. Micro time travel.
That's like microaggression to your children, is what that is.
Yeah. That's it's interesting.
Guess what? It's daylight savings times again, kids. Go to bed an hour early.
Oh my god. Yeah.
Yes, they were very smart. We were in bed early and we went to school on time.
You change it back after the kids are asleep. That's brilliant. Why didn't I think of that?
Well, the only way that wouldn't work is, if you grew up watching TV shows or something like that was a pretty good indicator of what time it was, when certain TV shows came on the TV. That would be.
And calling time on the phone.
Yeah. I remember that. Yeah, that was a thing that you could do. You could call and get the weather, and it would tell you the time.
Yeah. Well. Big Ben used to call it Big Ben clock in UK. Tell you the time.
Yeah. Oh man, I feel like I'm time traveling already. Talking
what
about
time is it now?
Services you call on the phone. You could what was it? You could do Google searches over the phone. Wasn't there a phone number you could call and you could just do a Google search that way, or you could text it or something like that. There's some kind of archaic way of doing a Google search and getting results. Yeah.
I wasn't part of that one. So unfortunately.
Also joining us is the Baron of Bloodhound, the Pirate King of PowerShell, Sean Metcalf, who you've already heard a little bit from. How are you, Sean?
Doing good, Adrian. How are you doing? Everything's good on my end. Getting ready for the holiday season, so I believe we're wrapping up with our last session soon. So, everything is beginning to look a lot like Christmas around here.
Yeah, here as well, as you can see from my video here. If you're watching this episode instead of listening to it, there. Yeah,
and I noticed you put up the tree. My kids cheated. We kept the tree up all year round, and they just made it a spring tree and a St. Patrick's Day
I know
tree
people that do that.
Summer tree, and they had a Thanksgiving tree.
I was down with the flu for a while, so I didn't put up the tree. They did it all without my help. So
Looks like they did a great job.
Them. But I've got teenagers, so yeah, it was yeah.
Put them to work.
Yeah, so it's hilarious. You can look up pretend to be a time traveler day, and there's a Wired article from 2007 that's full of suggestions on things to do. Like one of the other things is stand in front of a statue, any statue really, fall to your knees and yell no. It's one of those indications they use in movies, like if your history followed a different timeline, like the statues are going to be different, I guess.
Yeah, that's great. And you could throw everyone off and do it tomorrow, because no one would be expecting it.
Right. Oh boy, Security Weekly listeners, we need to hear your voices. Leave us your feedback on Apple Podcasts and submit a screenshot to our giveaway form for a chance to win a $100 gift card from Hacker Warehouse. This giveaway will be open until the end of the year. We appreciate your honest feedback so we can continue to make great content for our audience. Visit securityweekly.com/giveaway to enter. All right, and today we are going to discuss how Estonia built a digital society and protects it. We're excited to have Joseph Carson, Chief Security Scientist and Advisory CISO at Delinea, walk us through some Estonian history today. And this is something we've had, if you follow this podcast, you've heard from Mr. Joseph Carson before. And in the, I guess, probably maybe not when we're live. Maybe we discussed it a little bit when we're live, but Joseph, you've touched on some of this stuff. I think in between, before and after the segment. I thought, God, this is just fascinating. We've got to do a full segment on this.
Absolutely. I think it was when we did previously, we covered the ransomware walkthrough kind of incident, and I think we talked about afterwards. We went through some of the things because there was some new updates in Estonia at the time, and I was excited about it. And so we had a fun discussion on it. And I think it's really important to learn the Estonian kind of. A lot of times you hear about different points in time, but I like to tell how they got to where they are and that journey, because it really kind of gives you the perspective and the context. And I think it's always important to get the context, but it really tells you the mindset and the thought process and the journey and how others can learn from it. I think it's such a fascinating journey, and they've learned a lot, and they've been one of the biggest innovators in technology as a result of it. And I think it's really kind of the foundation of making that possible, and as well as making the digital services safer to use for citizens and very much trusted upon to live our daily lives.
Yeah, so to kick this off, I feel like some geographical foundation is both necessary and relevant to this. And I think Estonia is a company people have probably heard the name of, probably seen it in the news. Definitely if you're in security, you're probably at least vaguely aware of a Russian attack against the Estonian networks and their ability to connect to the outside internet. And that's been a while ago now, but
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was back in 2007. It was quite a long time ago, but it was an important time because it was the realization that what Estonia had done to date wasn't exactly foolproof. And it realized, there's a lot of realizations that while we were able to defend that specific attack, there was a lot of concerns over other types of attacks that could actually bring Estonia to a standstill. So it was a realization. It was known as the doomsday scenario. So I'll kind of go into a little bit more detail shortly. But for the audience, just to give you a bit of perspective, as Adrian was saying, where Estonia, just kind of some history. So Estonia it's one of the Baltic states, and those three Baltic states is Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. And where I'm based, Tallinn, which I'm sitting right now, is literally, it's a short, ferry ride to Helsinki. So you're familiar with the Nordics and Scandinavia. Estonia sits right across from the Baltic Sea with Helsinki in Finland. And to the east, we have a border with Russia, and to the south, a border with Latvia, and then surrounded by the Baltic Sea. It's a very small country, about 45,000 kilometers square, and a population of about just under 1.4 million people. But it's got a very rich history. A lot of major tech companies. People might be familiar with companies like Skype. You might be familiar with companies like Pipedrive, Starship, who creates the autonomous delivery robots that you see getting stuck on the snow at the moment here in Estonia. They create autonomous vehicles. So it's very, very a large tech innovating country, and a lot of great for startups. But a lot of that foundation really starts back in history. So I think it's really important to kind of, from an Estonia history perspective, Estonia was occupied for many years. And it was occupied by Russia after World War II, right up until 1991. And that's significant because, one of the things is that when you're a country that's occupied, especially by, in the Soviet Union times, that a country like Russia, they like to change your history to their version of history, their version of reality. So when you're occupied, whoever's in control of your country, they determine your history books, they determine the maps, they determine what education you're taught, determine what songs you sing, what's permitted. So a lot of that basically is controlled. And when you're controlling it, basically you're controlling a version of history. And when Estonia became independent back in 1991, one of the major challenges was when you're moving from a communist country to a non-communist country, the biggest challenge then was land ownership, was the legal documents. And then what happened was that, a lot of people were, as Estonia became independent, people were coming back to their families left Estonia over the years during that occupation to other countries, whether it being in the Nordics or to UK, to Canada, to the US. And when it became independent, a lot of them started returning. And that caused a major challenge with land ownership. Who owned the land? Because a lot of that land ownership, the notaries and the legal documents had been doctored, had been manufactured in order to give it to the Tsars and the Russian occupiers. So one of the major challenges that Estonia set forth, and in 1991, it was also the start of the internet. It was the start of computing. And of course, you had, CERN, one of the first websites. So Estonia at the same time, as they were becoming independent, they wanted to go down this paperless society, the paperless journey. They wanted to use computers to fuel the government. And so,
if I can have you pause real quick, sure. There. Estonia is one of three Baltic countries. Is there something different about Estonia, that kind of pushed them down this path? Were they historically more interested in technology or more involved in technology? Or, have Latvia and Lithuania kind of gone down this path as well?
So that's a great question. One of the different one of the places Estonia was it was the center of like a lot of the education in the Russian and Soviet Union. So it was one of the biggest universities here, where you had a lot of talent for mathematicians, cryptographers, scientists were based in Estonia. So then that fueled one of the the innovation side when it became independent. That was a really good foundation. But one of the things that was different from Estonia that Latvia and Lithuania did differently was that Latvia and Lithuania gave the Russian occupiers, the Russian citizens, or the Russian-speaking population who remained in those countries, they gave them basically citizenship. In Estonia, they actually didn't give them citizenship. They actually reserved a separate status for them, which was then alien passports. These alien, they had the ability to live in Estonia, work in Estonia, but they didn't have a decision into the government decisions and government direction. So by that, having that separation and difference between Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, it meant that Estonia could control a lot more of its own government decisions and going forward. So they had a little bit more of their own control, as well as that foundation of the education that was based in Estonia. So there was a little bit of difference. And there's also some slightly differences in the amount of Russian-speaking population in those countries. Estonia at the moment was around 25%, and I think it was a little bit higher in Latvia and much higher in Lithuania. So the diversity in those countries was also different as well from the independence. And that really kind of allowed Estonia to move forward at a different pace than its neighbors. And that foundation, one of the things that Estonia wanted to do was make sure that history could never be erased again. History could not be doctored by an occupying country. And what they really want to do was make sure non-repudiation. They want to make sure that no one could change their history again. And this was really the foundation. They were very patriotic and very passionate about the country, and they want to make sure that their language could survive and their history could survive, because their history had been changed over the years. And they wanted to bring that back to the real history and true history that Estonia had. So in 91 to 93. It was really kind of this young government downloading a pamphlet from the internet in order how to start a government, and ultimately, as well as making sure that history could never be erased, and the boom and the starting of the internet. So all of those three ingredients set forward. Now, one of the things the government said, there was a bunch of scientists and cryptographers and mathematicians at the time, and they said, as we're going down this digital path, make sure, go and find a way to make sure that our history can never be erased in a digital sense, in a digital way. And those scientists went off, and they spent a long time in the forest. I always say that the story, as I've been told, I was fortunate to meet one of those scientists, was I think that the vodka ran out, and they came out of the forest, and somebody had to go and get more vodka, and they realized that eventually they need to go back and report back their findings and research. So in 1996, the initial paper was published in the Academic Society. And 97, it was then kind of, shared back to the government. And that time they came back and they said that we found a solution to what you'd asked us to go and find, to make sure that history in a digital sense cannot be erased. And the paper itself was known as timestamping. And if you look at that paper, it is actually really the foundation of what Estonia's, use and interpretation of blockchain. And that really started kind of their path forward of using timestamping and blockchain to make sure that in a digital sense that their history could not be erased. And always people think of blockchain as they tie it to cryptocurrency and ledgers and so forth. And I always try to look at a kind of a real world scenario, and I always think of, what would blockchain look like in the real world? And it really, blockchain foundation really dates back to the 70s. It goes back to actually Ralph Merkle and the Merkle tree. So when you think about Ralph Merkle, it was actually 79. And when you were transferring data from one network to another network, what would happen is you would have a lot of noise and failures. And what the Merkle tree was there was to do concatenation of hashes, so that you could take a concatenation of hashes and then compare it with the transfer, and you could confirm that your data was transferred across the network. Integrity was intact. And when I always compare that, you even look at the Bible itself as a real world interpretation of a blockchain. What it means is that it's not to say that what the data is accurate. What it's saying is that you've got a series of events that was documented, agreed upon, and widely distributed. So if you want to change one version of the book, then the Bible, you would have to change all versions, so they self basically and keep each other intact. So we'll kind of look at that foundation. It was then in the late 90s that as Estonia was going down this path, they decided that in order to make sure that their kind of digital services that they were building in the internet and the digital world was that they needed these key ingredients, and that was basically a identity. Identity was one of those key things. Signature. And then timestamping, and you build all those together. That was the ability that they were able to make sure that as they were building this technical foundation, that they could provide services to the citizens, that they could make sure that the history in the digital world could not be erased. And that was key. And that was they realized that they were no longer going down this paperless society path. It was really the transformation of the government into really realizing that a government is truly a service provider for the citizens. And their role is to make sure that citizens get that service with ease, with trust, and with transparency. So those were the key ingredients. And ultimately, laws were passed in 2000. They passed the digital signature law, which enabled digital signature to be equal to that as a paper signature. They created a digital identity, which was based on PKI and authentication certificate and a change authorization certificate. So they really built that foundation back in 2000. And that meant that the first introductions of services, digital services, was around 2002. And that first one was the tax service. And this is really where it's the kind of, the carrot and the, is that how to make sure that you get people to adopt it. And citizens back then, you had to get this ID card, which was your digital identity that allowed you to interact with the government services. But basically the value you were getting was reducing wasted time. You could either go in queue and fill out forms and, take a long time and, take time out of your work, or you can simply use this ID card, log into the tax authority with a few clicks, maybe about 15 minutes back in 2002, your taxes were done. So there was this real value that they were adding, as well as transparency. Citizens can log in and see the audit logs. And that was one of the things to get the adoption, was to look at real pain services that were painful and taking a long time to do, and making them simpler and easier for citizens to adopt. And many services since 2002 really were accelerated, such as things like opening a business, or to do banking, to log into your telco information, the population register. So it really accelerated with a lot of services. And in 2004, yep, go ahead.
Let's talk a little bit about the technology here. Like when you say an ID card, are we talking about credentials? Were they actually issuing, because smart cards were around back then, right? Were they issuing something physical here? Did you have a single ID or set of credentials that you'd use across all these services, or were they separate?
Absolutely. So it was a smart card. Basically, and that smart card had a X509 certificate on it. It had two certificates, one for signing and one for authentication. And that was tied back to your digital identity back in the government's registers. So in that case, it was referred to as the schema was known as X-Road. And X-Road is that information exchange, where each, let's say, register, whether it being a population register, that maintained the data on the citizen. The tax register maintained the tax information, and it was deduplicated, so that data didn't reside in any of those systems, duplicated data. You were given the metadata that will tell you where that data resided. So we had a physical card. Back then, you would have to plug it into an ID card reader on your computer, and then that would give you the ability to go and log on to the government services, file your taxes, and interact with the government services, and also get transparency and auditability. So it was a physical card back in 2002, and then later years, around the late 2000s, that was able to then transfer to your mobile phone. So your phone itself became an extension of your ID card, where you then had what was then is basically the certificates on your SIM card in the phone, and that was an extension. So you basically enroll those as child certificates off your parent ID card, and you no longer needed that ID card. You can then use your mobile phone. And so that's even extended further today, where now it's moved to much more basically, Face ID and, wireless, types of near-field communication authentication as well. So they've advanced it even further to the point where you don't need that ID card. It's just a parent one, and everything else is a child of that. So at least you have the revocation ability of the identities.
And I presume today, if I would go to the Google Play Store or to the Apple Store, I'd find a bunch of official Estonian and apps for different things.
Absolutely. You've got apps for reading the data. You've got apps for doing digital signatures and for signing documents. You've got interactions with the health portals. A lot of it's through the app itself is quite simple. A lot of it's through basically web portals and interfaces and APIs. So as far as interoperability is very, very much there. But one of the things, going back to that 2002 and that journey to, one of the big things was around 2004. That's when Estonia joined EU and also joined NATO. And that was almost like a big kind of to its, its old occupier Russia. It was a signal that Estonia was no longer tied to the East, and it was moving much more to Western focus, that its priorities and future was more Western oriented. So in 2004, that was a big signature kind of move that the Estonian government made to really tie itself to the Western world. And that really set forward kind of its, continuous, innovations. And ultimately, we're in 2005, the Estonian government then enabled the ability to do internet voting. It's not just electronic voting, but it's internet voting. And that allowed you to basically go, use a computer, use that ID card, that digital ID that you had, and go and vote. And you could vote, basically, the voting would open up 10 days prior to closing. You could vote multiple times for one, whichever candidate that you wanted to. And if that candidate said something stupid, you can go and change your vote, which is fantastic. That gives you choice. It also prevented collusion, people buying votes. And then the internet voting would close, I think it was about 2-3 days before. And then if you wanted to change your vote, you would have to go and do it in person. So really kind of made voting much more diverse, much more inclusive, meaning that you weren't tied to taking days off. You could do it any time of the day. You could do it in any location. Even if you were, let's say stuck at home or you had, in hospital with an illness, you could simply still vote. You weren't restricted. So it really opened up voting, and it's quite largely used today. About 1/3 of all votes is using that system, and that was significant. But there was a moment now in 2007, and this is when Estonia decided that there was a statue in the center of the city, which was a statue known as the Victory Day statue or Fallen Soldier. And what they decided to do was that soldier was a contention of conflict within the society. And they decided that they wanted to move that to a graveyard. And that decision opened up a bit of a conflict between Russian citizens, Russian-speaking citizens in Estonia, and the government. And there was violence in the streets. That was in April 27th, 2007. And what ended up having was Russia seen this as a oppression against the Russian-speaking population. So ultimately, that decision to move the statue resulted in an all-out, cyber attack against Estonia. And what happened was the telcos were taken offline, the banking systems, the parliament, and it was kind of like almost like a lot of countries were looking at Estonia, going, "Well, that's what you get, for being dependent on digital services and going digital and having that dependency." But Estonia was really looking at this as this is a lesson that we can learn. How can we improve going forward? How can we make it better? But the big realization was that DDoS attacks and the cyber attacks lasted for around 2 weeks. But if you were in Estonia within about 2 to 3 days, the services were back to normal. It was for if you were outside Estonia trying to access Estonian information systems, that was more challenging, because a lot of the attacks were being from other countries, so they were being filtered. And if you're one of those countries, then the services were more difficult to access. So it was more, if you were in the country, things were quite normal and back to normal, and you could do your day-to-day society and so forth. But the big challenge, if I told as I mentioned, that Estonia does have a border with Russia, and there was a large military buildup of military training exercises on the border. And the realization is that there was a land invasion, going back to my original kind of, about time stamping and blockchain that Estonia uses for non-repudiation. The core data at the time was stored in Estonian borders in the land of Estonia. So if you have a land invasion and the attackers destroyed the data centers, the whole non-repudiation of making sure history cannot be erased in a digital sense, that was flawed. That was realized that it wasn't as secure as designed that they originally thought, because a physical land attack would actually destroy that ability, that history. So they realized that was the doomsday scenario, that they needed to have a disaster recovery, a resiliency against a land invasion type of attack. And this is where they started innovating. It was an interesting time. It was around 2008, just a year after the attack, that they were all emergency meetings. There was U.S. government was in, and there was EU, security analysts and experts, and all looking at ways in order to how can Estonia preserve and make sure that it could actually be resilient to future cyber attacks, including land invasions. And even to the point where the NATO Cyber Defense Cooperative Center of Excellence is based here in Tallinn since 2008. And that was a significant ability to look at research and cyber resilience for all NATO countries moving forward. But it was an interesting, shortly, if you have a question, I'll shortly move to how Estonia was able to solve that particular challenge, because it was a pretty impressive way to think outside the box.
Yeah. I think Sean had a question, and then we'll jump into how to do BCPDR for an entire country.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I can't even imagine. But my question is, since Estonia was so early in the digital identity space, were there changes that had to be made over the past decade plus in order to leverage more modern technology, security, et cetera? And what were the challenges around the evolution of digital identity since the early days, moving towards more modern approaches that are now, leveraged and embraced by large corporations and standardized now?
Absolutely. That's a great question, Sean. And there's been a lot of lessons along the years. I think the big one was around 2008, where, the timestamping protocol that Estonia was very heavily dependent on for the ID card, because that's what allowed you to, when you did an authentication, there was this timestamping that basically that timestamp went into a concatenation of hashes, as you mentioned, which basically got into a root hash. And that root hash actually was then signed by PKI, but then that root hash was ultimately printed in the Financial Times. So, as going back to my example of the Bible, it gets printed in the Financial Times, the root hash, which means that even when that happens, the Estonian government can't even change history, because it gets printed in the Financial Times, widely distributed. In order to change history, Estonia would have to be able to get all the papers of that day and destroy them. And the mathematical probability of that's quite difficult. But in 2008, one of the big challenges was Google Chrome decided to change, disable and not support the timestamping protocol, and that was a major challenge. Then that was a realization that they couldn't move forward. And one of the things was that it was 50,000 cards would need to be redone, and all the other cards would become void if you wanted to use Google Chrome as your main browser. So that basically introduced a piece of software that you would actually then download, and it would basically allow you to re-update the keys and the protocol on the card itself. So another challenge, but a way forward to find, as technology changes and your dependencies on other, technologies such as browsers to work with and different ways of authentication, they had to find ways in order to solve those over time. I think the biggest one was around 2015, 2016 is when they changed the provider for the actually SIM card, the ID card itself. And as they did that, the mathematical, encryption was found that there was actually a weakness in the encryption itself that could be possibly be able to crack and find the private keys. So that was a major flaw that happened around 2015, 2016. And again, lucky enough for actually the Google Chrome issue, the actually same software that was used to update the card then saved Estonia back in 2015, 2016 to be able to change to elliptic curve, the algorithm itself. So that meant that they were saved from having to do over 1 million cards to recall. So there's been challenges along the way as technology changes. So they keep adopting. I think there's the EU's basically EIADS version for basically the European identity card, and it basically complies with that. So it makes it open and interoperable between other countries' identity service providers, and it really allows integration, interoperability to the point where it's really evolving and innovating with newer technologies. So as I mentioned, it's even one of the recent things was around integration with even artificial intelligence and automation, which is really cool. I find that fascinating, where it's almost like an agent of myself that can interact with the government on my behalf. So I don't have to waste my time. And it's really exciting where that's going to evolve even further, where I can simply, if I've done something in the past, I can have my digital self do it again without my involvement. The only thing I might have to do is, do authentication. I might have to do a digital signature, but how great is it, that I can basically oversee those, but at the same time have my bot do it for me. So it's great that seeing that Estonia is continuing to evolve and add more service, to the point where that there's 3,000, almost 4,000 services that have been digitalized and provided through the system. That really, at the end of the day, we all talk about what is the value. And the value here is reducing people's wasting time. That's the most valuable thing in this entire world. Is we talk about currency, we talk about data, we talk about oil and energy. The most valuable thing in this time is in this world is time. We only have a finite amount of time, and how we live our lives and what we do with it is the most valuable thing. And where governments can give us time back, and I think, was it Adrian? You touched on Ireland going to the 4-day work week, which is great. Which it's seen that companies can become more productive by giving more time back to employees, and that's what Estonian government methodology is about, reducing that wasted time. And that's how they measure the success of the entire system, is making sure that citizens are not wasting their time queuing to vote, or queuing for prescriptions, or going and filling in taxes, or doing their banking. They truly are, one of the innovators of being a true service provider to citizens, and not being a front door, and having true auditability.
Yeah, there's so many of those government services where it's almost a tradition to have to plan your whole day around it, because you have no idea how long it's going to take.
Changing your driver's license, was it your home address, or moving state and changing driver's license? A lot of that can be sometimes painful. Here, it's just a click of a button, and 2 buttons even.
Yeah, and I mean, there's certain things that I think have gotten a lot better, like renewing my vehicle registration. Voting, those things can be pretty easy if you do them at the right time. Like generally, if it's but that's only in my state, in Tennessee. In other states, like I found out in the state of New York, like every person that is eligible to vote in New York City has to go vote on the same day. Which I don't understand states where there's no early vote. It just seems,
if you were sick, I mean, during the pandemic, this was really where Estonia's kind of realization, when kids had to homeschool, when people couldn't go and vote in queues because you were afraid of getting sick. Estonia, you could sit at your home and safely vote. Your kids could be at home and continue their schoolwork and study. You could still get your prescriptions and you could still see a doctor. All of these services meant that it was always a funny saying in Estonia was that, after the pandemic kind of, restrictions ended, Estonians could go back to their 5 meters distance again because 2 meters was too close. They like their bubbles. They like to have their own distances. So, having 2 meters was sometimes a little bit too close for them. But it's getting in really where they realize, that was a kind of a savior for the country to continue. Those services, definitely made a big difference. I think one of the things I want to cover was going back to that 2007 doomsday scenario, is when they realized that if a country came in and destroyed the data centers, that was the end of their repudiation. The DR story. So what happened was, there was a lot of discussions, and my expertise at the time was DDoS attacks. I remember going back, and I worked on, it was the same time when Steve Gibson was doing the grc.com DDoS attack, and I worked on a lot of those cases then as well. So my specialty was DDoS. And then, we were looking at, I was getting asked, how do you defend against those types of attacks? And it was about decentralization, no single fault, single failure. And so the recommendation was to decentralize Estonian data centers outside of the land of Estonia. But the Supreme Court said you can't do that because it's sovereign data. You can't move it outside of the borders of Estonia. And so we were kind of like, okay, how do we do this? And one of the CIOs at the time, which was David Kotka, he basically was working thesis, came up with an idea, which really goes back to, if you look up the Principality of Hutt River, that's where some of the sources of the idea come from, which is a country in Australia that was dissolved. But you should go and look at that offline another time.
Funny.
But it's an interesting story.
Crazy micronation. Yeah.
Yep, it's a micronation that. But yeah, it's a long story for another time. But ultimately, Tavi came up with the idea about let's do data embassies. Why can't we store the data in the embassy locations? Because they are sovereign land of Estonia. So this came up basically with the idea of using virtual data embassies and actually being able to use the embassies and decentralize the government outside the physical land in Estonia. And that meant that basically by distributing and having those, that Estonia really started to become a really true e-country, where it was no longer physically dependent on the land. If Estonia was ever basically destroyed or disaster or land invasion, data centers destroyed, they could operate the country from any one of those data embassy locations. And that really meant the data, resiliency, thinking outside the box, and decentralization, because, a lot of countries, still have that same challenge. There's a lot of countries where, they're on the borders of very, geopolitical, unstable situations. And for them to, really take that same approach, I think it's a big step and a big difference. Ultimately, then, the data embassy locations were not ideal because there was embassies in different countries. So it was around 2015, or was it 2017 is when they then went to having originally it was meant to be in the UK, but they decided to have it in Luxembourg. In a data center in Luxembourg became the first actually location in a data center was actually classified as an embassy land, and therefore they were able to use true data center capabilities and decentralize the country. So I think this virtual data embassy is such a great idea. It's like putting a diplomatic sticker on data and saying, well, no matter where this data resides, it's bound by the regulations and sovereign land of a country. Similar to what GDPR tries to do with EU citizens' data. But ultimately then, it really launched then Estonia's e-residency platform as well. And that's what came out of it, so that any citizen around the world could become an e-resident of Estonia and leverage the Estonian services as well. So you could be in the US, get an e-residency ID from Estonia, and open up a business and provide your services to EU. So really extending that ease of use and Estonian innovation to globally. So there's tens of thousands of e-residency, that are using those services around the world. So really thinking that innovation and next steps, I think that's really where the country's really realization. And I think there's a lot of lessons that other countries can take advantage of. The hardest part, I think, going back to Sean's kind of point, is the hardest part is always that last mile. Is that how do you interact with the citizens? Especially in the US, when you've got many different states that have different, state laws and how you interact. That's always the hardest challenge. This whole infrastructure backend thing is quite easy to do, but it's how you interact and provide the services, the experience. It's that last mile, to the citizen is always the challenge, and that's what's typically unique for each country is how you do that interaction. And if you solve that, I did a calculation that Estonia saves it's about 5 days, 6 days GDP per year on what they've done with these digital services, and that calculates into about 2.5-3 billion a year in savings. If the US had something similar, the US could save up to $1 trillion per year with basically a fully federated identity service for citizens.
More
that's what you're looking at, just more efficient, reduction in wasted time, giving the citizens back that valuable time that that they can spend with their families and life.
Yeah, and it's madness here with all the different states, because not everything is handled at the federal level. So I'm not even sure what that would look like here. It's critical. It means interoperability. That's what it comes down to. Is how you come up with a common framework. You can all have your own laws and your own way of interacting with the citizens, but how you make it interoperable is what's key. How do the system communicate with each other when they need to, with the citizens' oversight. One of the important things with the Estonian system is trust. Is
trust is not just, you don't get trust immediately just by delivering a service. Trust has to be gained, and it has to be that you have citizen has oversight when they need to. So me as a citizen of Estonia, I can log into the services. I can take a look at the data of my access to my data and see who's been accessing my data when and how. And then I can go to that root hash and I can verify that this data has not been doctored or tampered with. So it allows the citizen, if they wanted to provide that self-oversight, self-governance of their own government. And that's why it's key is transparency is so critical, and trust is built over time to the services. And that's why a lot of the citizens trust the services, because that trust is built in, that transparency is made possible.
Wow. Yeah, it's the average company struggles to do that, much less a government. It's very inspiring. This was awesome. Thank you so much for taking us on this journey, Joseph. And
no problem. It's been a pleasure. This is for me. It's one of the fun topics because while I live in Estonia, I've been here for 20 years. That seeing the journey and seeing the evolution and being part of it. And I remember I talked about the AI piece. I had a big debate with the CIO of SIEM because it was called CRAT. I was like, CRAT? I was like, that's Estonian mythological creature that steals like treasure for its master. And I'm going, how the hell is Estonia government going to sell this idea of CRAT? Because it sounds a bit scary that the government's going to be stealing, the treasure for the government. But ultimately, it was a great idea. It was a genius, and to the point where the actually law is called the CRAT law, and it's the CRAT bot, which is the Sony AI bot. Ultimately, what it is basically it's an automated me. It's an automated version of me that makes my life better. It helps me, not repeat things over and over again. So I think, looking at some of those amazing innovations, there's a lot of lessons learned, a lot of great ideas, and ultimately people can get a lot of value out of it. So for me, it's always exciting to talk about.
Yeah. Same here. Yeah. I'm glad we did this. All right. Thank you so much for joining us today, Joseph.
It's been a pleasure, and look forward to some more chats and discussions again in the future. Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely around AI. We're going to be talking about AI a bit later with the news. And also, we've got another interview coming up. Stay tuned. When we come back, we're going to talk behavioral science with Lisa Plaggemier from the National Cybersecurity Alliance. The cybersecurity landscape is full of single solution providers, making it easy for unexpected cyber threats to sneak through the cracks. That's why Fortra is creating a stronger, simpler strategy for protection, one that increases your security maturity while decreasing the operational burden that comes with it. This is all possible thanks to Fortra's best-in-class portfolio and deep bench of expert problem solvers. Fortra's integrated, scalable solutions help customers face their toughest challenges with confidence. Learn more at securityweekly.com/Fortra. Customers want fast and frictionless digital experiences, yet also expect protection against breaches, privacy violations, and fraud. Drive engagement by optimizing security and convenience to attract and retain customers. Use the PingOne cloud platform to build, test, and optimize digital experiences. The no-code orchestration engine weaves together authentication, user management, and MFA, all of which can enhance security, drive engagement, and boost revenues. Visit securityweekly.com/ping identity to learn more. We know that many of you are looking to bolster your security posture with cloud-native app protection and XDR. So if you haven't heard of Uptycs, put them on your radar. They offer both cloud and endpoint security in a single solution. Listeners can use Uptycs for up to 1,000 assets for a full year for only $1. But hurry, this offer is available only through December 31st at securityweekly.com/UPTYCS. Welcome back to Enterprise Security Weekly. Join our Discord channel to chat with our hosts, ask questions, customize live stream alerts, and more. Visit securityweekly.com/Discord to receive an invite. Tyler and I use only the best gifts there. All right, for our second interview, Lisa Plaggemier joins us today to talk about behavioral science in cybersecurity. I love this, the title that you gave us here, Lisa, A Whole Lotta BS about cybersecurity. BS being behavior. Right. Lisa is the executive director at the National Cybersecurity Alliance, has a background in security culture, awareness, and education. Welcome to the show, Lisa.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I think this is one of our favorite conversations here because I think it's something that, in general, I don't know, maybe security people tend to be more technical people, less social creatures. But we see and hear a lot of horror stories. We definitely see the behavioral science not applied. In a lot of security awareness products.
Well, and honestly, I have yet to see an incident that doesn't involve a human in some way, shape, or form, right? Even if it's a technical human, there's usually some form of human error or oversight or well-intentioned individual who did something they shouldn't have that's involved in every single incident. So no matter how technical you are, when you're doing a post-mortem and looking at your root cause, there's going to be a human being in there somewhere.
Absolutely. Like right now, there's I'm going to blank on the name of it, but there's that big 0-day event that they do every year where you can win prizes and stuff like that. And there's just this obsession with with exploits and vulnerabilities. Then you look at the actual data. And pwn to own. Thank you, Tyler. And it's just so rarely used. Those kinds of things. Yeah, I mean, sure, it's low hanging fruit if it's there, and attacker will take advantage of it. But what's always going to be there is a person. And what's always going to work on that person is some kind of social engineering, some kind of attack that steals their credentials or something like that.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah, very reliable on the part of the attackers.
We are as humans reliably unreliable and reliably inconsistent and often irrational in some of our decision-making abilities. Yeah. We do a research study every year now called OBehave, and it's based on that behavioral science model. And what that says is that you just need three things: capability, motivation, and opportunity before you exhibit a behavior. So I have to be capable, I have to know, that's usually knowledge based. I have to know how to do something. So, for example, I know how to clean my garage. I've had opportunity to clean my garage, except when Michigan's playing football on a Saturday, but I don't have any motivation. And so my garage is still messy. So very often it's that motivation piece that really hangs people up. And if you think about all the work we do in training and awareness and how we review the content, right? We might take a lot of time choosing a vendor, reviewing the training content that they've got available before we go to launch content in our organizations, launch training modules. We've probably got somebody from HR or corporate communications who's looking at it to make sure it's like on brand for our organization. Of course, we have a security team making sure it aligns with all our policies. There might be somebody from compliance who wants to look at it too. It goes through round after round after round of review, making sure that it says all the right things and aligns with all our policies. So that's the capability piece, right? We're going to give people all this knowledge, but at no point in that review process does anybody say, hey, our employees going to emotionally connect with this? And is it going to motivate them to change their behavior? That's just never a part of the equation.
Yeah, and there have been some shockingly bad examples, like I think it was the Chicago Tribune, where they told the employees they weren't getting bonuses, and then like a week or two after telling them they weren't going to get bonuses, they used a phishing test that promised them bonuses. Like that's like how out of touch do you have to be to make a gaffe like that?
Incredibly. Yeah. I mean, one of the things we learned in our research was that because we know people are emotional, make emotional decisions, and sometimes do things that are irrational, and because we know that motivation piece is like the hardest part of that behavioral science model, we ask people how they feel about security. And we learn things like they feel frustrated, they feel intimidated, they worry about being victimized. And then when you layer on there a phishing email like the one you're describing, which is really kind of cruel, or some of the simulated phishing emails that were sent at the beginning of COVID, before there was a vaccine available, like click here to see, how to get your vaccine. Things like that really took advantage of people's emotional vulnerabilities. Now, I know that you can argue that those are the right thing to do because those mimic what the bad guys are doing. But at the same time, it's incredibly demotivating to your employees. If they hate the security team, if they're frustrated, if they're intimidated, if they've seen one too many pictures of hackers in hoodies, and they're just kind of up to here with the whole thing, then that's just incredibly demotivating. And you want engagement. You want a relationship with the security team and your employees, right? You want people coming to you asking, we want security by design, then that means that we've got to be involved in the beginnings of projects, not at the end, like, oh, gee, somebody from security should review this thing we're doing, this product, this service, this process, whatever. And we complain that we get brought in at the last minute. But, I would argue that a lot of us aren't doing enough sort of outreach to the employees in our organizations in a way that doesn't feel intimidating or frustrating or any of these things that people told us that they already feel when it comes to cybersecurity.
Well, and it seems to me that if we put this on a number scale, the outcome of your security awareness campaign isn't necessarily, the extent of that number scale isn't 10 to 0 or 0 to 10. It's like 10 to negative 10. Like you can do more.
You can make people hate you. Yeah.
Yeah. You can do more. Like the worst outcome isn't that, oh, they didn't get any better at, our program didn't make them any better. You can do some real damage, right? I imagine.
Yeah. I mean, actually, when I first was recruited into security I was working at ADP in marketing, and we'd been doing thought leadership on security topics. This was an automotive division of the big payroll processor and human resource company. And so I was getting familiar with all the topics and the issues that were facing the auto industry. This was like the early days of the connected car, like when the G-Pack happened and things like that. And we were getting spun off from ADP. And so the chief security officer came to me and said, I want you to join the security team. And I kind of looked at him like, I'm not technical at all. Like I have a, cursory understanding of this stuff, just enough to regurgitate it when we do like workshops for customers or thought leadership, speaking engagements, articles, things like that. And I said, what in the heck would I do on the security team? And he said, well, I need somebody to write board presentations because this is, now that we're not part of ADP anymore, like we have to form our own security group and we'll be reporting directly to our own board, and help with, incident communications and things like that, crisis comms. And, oh yeah, we need a training and awareness program. And I said, what's that? And he said, that stuff that ADP makes us do once a year. And I said, I don't want to do that. People hate that stuff. So
yeah,
he said, fine, if you want to do something interesting, then, come up with something really creative and we'll get the budget. And we did. And that was really the important thing. Like, that's what got me off to the races, was realizing that we're trying to find relationships with people all around the company. And some of the tactics that we used were kind of off the wall, but I remember getting, Slack messages from people saying, hey, I think we have an incident we need to report. And because of that message you sent or those videos you did, that were highly entertaining, like, I thought I'd better tell somebody about this, because you're trying to form human relationships with people and get them to advocate for the company. And guess what? Most employees really don't care that much about your company's data or whatever it is you're trying to protect. So,
you said something that I think is really important early on. You said humans are reliably unreliable, and this is one of the things that really annoys me when I hear things like humans are the weakest link and things like that, because that should be part of how we design our systems, right? We already know what the outcome is going to be. And at the same time, we know we can't put 100% of our employees through training 100% of the time before they ever use our systems or have access to data. So I would think, designing security around people, employees attached to your business, you have to assume some level of failure, is always going to occur, some percentage of failure, which is why, I think that's a good argument for not running the COVID scam or the we're going to give you a bonus scam, like doing some of the more ethically questionable phishing tests here, because something's going to work against them, and you just have to be prepared for that, right?
Right. Yeah. It's yeah, I think the biggest problem with those simulated phish that are kind of cruel are that they just don't acknowledge that we're all in this kind of together, right? It's an us versus them. It's hey, we're the security team and we know what we're doing and you don't. And I think that's what isn't good for the relationship with the rest of the companies, the rest of the employees in your company. I think it kind of draws a line. And I used to teach a certification class in training and awareness. And I've attended Dr. Cialdini's Principles of Persuasion workshop. So that's the guy who wrote the book in the 80s that every salesperson uses about the different ways you can persuade people to do things. And it's really a handbook in social engineering, but you can use it for good, right? That's called sales and marketing versus using it for bad. And I was having everybody, one of the exercises in the class was to take those principles of persuasion, pick one of the principles, and then here's a cybersecurity topic, and then talk to me like, as a group exercise or homework or something, come back and tell me like, which principle would you use to communicate that particular security topic? And like, what would that, give me a brief description of what that would look like. And every single person in the class chose the principle of authority, which is literally do it because I said so. Or, what we might hear in common marketing vernacular is, 9 out of 10 doctors recommend, or things like that. That's the principle of authority. And so the next time I taught the class was actually at RSA, and I had to tell people you're not allowed to use the principle of authority, because I find that so often we just, we are very specialized in security, right? There's a lot of super smart people, but telling other people to do something just because I'm smarter than you doesn't always go over that well with the audience. So I think that's part of the problem with those, simulated fish that are seemingly really clever, but are really just putting up a wall between you and your employee population.
Yeah, definitely. Sean, I know you have a few questions here.
Yeah, absolutely. So Lisa, you've written before about security guidance that how it shouldn't be negative. Basically, how we typically say in security, don't do this. This needs to be fixed. How do you think as an industry that we can better communicate with people about these things?
So I think, we often complain that people want convenience and they want speed and they want things to be easy. And we talk about that like that's the enemy of security. And I really think it's just in the words that we use. It's how we package it. It's the spin, if you will. So things like multi-factor authentication are incredibly easy to do, right? So we should talk about the ease and convenience, especially if I get a push notification authenticator app on my phone, I've got facial recognition, like boom, right? I'm in. Like it's super, super simple and it's very quick. Another example, my password manager can create, if I'm creating a new account somewhere, I'm changing a password, it can create a long, complex password that meets all the rules of whatever that site is, a whole lot faster than I can, right? It can populate when I've already got a website, an account loaded into my password manager, it can populate my credentials a whole lot faster than I can. So it's just, I think we just need to change the language that we use in some cases. When we, if we accept the fact that people feel intimidated by this stuff and they feel a little frustrated, according to our research, then we should be using words like quick and easy and simple. And one of our, some of our language this past October for Cybersecurity Awareness Month, we're the co-founders of Cybersecurity Awareness Month along with CISA. Some of our language was around like, it's easy to stay safe online. It's easy to do this. It's easy to do that. It's quick. It's simple. It's efficient. And we got a little bit of backlash from security professionals on Twitter in the first couple of days of October saying, this stuff isn't easy. This is really hard. Well, if you tell people like my mom or my kids that this is hard, they're not going to do it, right? They're not going to make the behavior change that we want. Because you've just told them this is really complicated and this is really hard. And so what do we have? We have people that are intimidated and frustrated and scared. And we have ourselves to blame, right? But pictures of hackers in hoodies, language that's very militaristic, threats and defenses, and the way we talk about security. And it's all very complicated and we're very smart because we understand it and you don't. And so we kind of have reaped what we've sown, right? If you haven't made something attractive, it's no wonder that people aren't attracted. So if we want people to change their behavior, we got to make it sound good. We have to make it sound like you're going to feel so much better if you do these things. This is going to be convenient. This is going to make your life easier. You're going to sleep better at night. You're not going to worry as much about these things, right? You're not going to be frustrated by that password manager. It's going to make your day go faster.
Right.
It's just it's our vernacular in this world, I think. And that's what gets me up every day is, I think I'm in a dream job at the National Cybersecurity Alliance because every day our team gets to look at that chasm between the world of cybersecurity and, we read the press, we know what's happening. And then we have our other foot, if you will, is over the border in the consumer public, interacting with people and understanding like where their head is at on this stuff and why they don't do the behaviors that we want them to do. And so our work to bridge that communication gap between these two worlds, it's really easy to look at the world going to hell in a security handbasket and just shake your head and be frustrated. Like, how can people not know this? Like, this is horrific. Like, we need to do something, like people should just be more aware and they should change. And it's really easy to look at that and be frustrated and discouraged, even as security professionals. But then you look at it from the average consumer's perspective, and I pick on my kids and my mom all the time, but they really are the demographics that struggle the most, older folks and younger folks. And a lot of us of working age find ourselves taking care of the technology needs of our kids, trying to keep our kids safe online, and then our aging loved ones as well, right? We get the call from mom, well, I clicked on this thing that I maybe shouldn't have, and my computer is acting weird. And so understanding their struggles and being empathetic to that, and then, having solutions that sound more, instead of, victim shaming, having solutions for them that are easy to do and are convenient and it'll give them peace of mind. Like, that sounds a lot more inviting than talking about, this image and conjuring up this image of a hacker in a hoodie and somebody out to get me 24/7. And I'm just
right.
grist for the mill.
Yeah, I like that approach.
Out there, I think you got that right when you said demotivating. Like my favorite is defenders have to be right 100% of the time, and attackers only have to get it right once. I don't think it's true, and I think it's horrible to tell people that. Yeah. Sorry, Sean. I'll let you ask your follow-up.
Actually, you're right, Adrian. So I've talked at conferences before, and I said, yeah, it might be the case that attackers only have to be right once, and defenders have to be right 100% of the time for them to get in. Once they're in, that math shifts around the other way. And so then once the attackers are in the environment, they have to be right 100% of the time, and the defender just has to be right once to detect them. But I had a follow-up based on what you were saying, Lisa. I love this approach of being more caring and empathetic with people instead of saying, oh, well, you got to kind of be aware, be afraid of all these things that are happening out there. And your organization, the National Cybersecurity Alliance, is tackling quite the large challenge, which I think is great. One of the greatest challenges I've seen personally is the huge range of knowledge around cybersecurity. How do you adjust based on this level of knowledge, which can range to minimal, which is my parent, to quite knowledgeable, which could be my peers potentially?
So a lot of the assets that we make available, and everything is available for free, right? We've got kits for Data Privacy Week and Cybersecurity Awareness Month. We're going to be doing a romance scam campaign in February. We tackle all kinds of topics during the year. We try to have a content that covers the gamut. So, and I also see it as there's like stages of engagement with security too, right? So if you think about, I used to work in marketing with Ford Motor Company, and if you see an ad from Ford on TV, like a Super Bowl ad or something, that's to get your attention on the brand of Ford Motor Company. If you see an ad from a local dealer talking about a vehicle, that's buy a Ford from me, right? I've got you interested in the brand. Now I'm going to bring you down the funnel, the old school sales funnel, to think about where you might buy it from. And then if you see an ad in the paper or something or online that talks about a sale or a particular price or an incentive, a rebate, something, that's buy a Ford from me now. And that's at the dealer level as well. So you've got this like funnel of pulling people in, right? Getting them engaged over time until they eventually walk into a dealership and buy a vehicle. If we think about that from a security perspective, my role in life in my work world might be to be a software developer or something. And I might be just frustrated with security or not care at all. But as you get me more and more interested in the subject, beyond just like, here's how to recognize a phish or, to tell if you're being socially engineered somehow, the ultimate for somebody in that role might be like, boy, I really want you to take some OWASP Top 10 training. I want you to be a more secure developer or whatever. You could pick any different role and think about like, what is that funnel that I'm trying to pull somebody through to? What is that ultimate, if that person really did believe that part of their job encompassed security in some way, whether they're an accounts payable or they're a software developer, what would their behavior look like? How would that change? And so how do I take them from, I don't know, and I don't care, through, down the funnel of engagement through to actually changing their behavior? So I don't see it so much as knowledge per se as I do engagement, because we never just tell somebody something and they go do it. if it was that simple, we all know McDonald's sells French fries. They would never run an ad with French fries in it again if they only had to tell us once that they sell French fries, come buy French fries, right? But they're just constantly telling us and showing us pictures of French fries because they want us to come to McDonald's and buy French fries. Even if we've been there before, they want us back again and again and again and again. And so it's just that drumbeat, constant drumbeat over time of keeping people engaged and to get them to the point where they actually do something, the thing you want them to do. A lot of people, one of the things we learned in our research, it was 3,000 people in the US, the UK, and Canada. And one of the things we learned is that the vast majority of people say that security is important to them and they say that they prioritize it. But then when we ask them about specific behaviors, we see the big disconnects. So one of the questions is probably one of my favorite questions. We ask people a lot of questions about passwords, how often they use ones that are truly unique and things like that. We ask them what their preferred method is of keeping track of their passwords. And far and away in all three countries, and most of the companies I've presented to during Cybersecurity Awareness Month, the most popular answer is I write them down in a notebook, which is terrifying. The other answers are things like I keep them on a document on my phone and like, well, I've password protected that document or on my laptop or something. Or I just remember them because I have a schema that I'm using where I change a couple of characters or digits depending on which account it is I'm logging into. Like they've thought of some core password and then they've thought of some trick, which they think is going to make them smarter than a bad guy, to alter that core password in a way that they can still remember it, but they think they're being clever enough to outsmart the bad guys. So I say all this to say that people say this is important to them. And it's not that they're doing nothing. They keep that password notebook because they know that all their passwords have to be long and complex and they can't remember them and they don't have another tool to do that, or they're unaware or don't trust password managers. They only change a few characters because they've told themselves this story that that the bad guys won't be able to figure that out, right? There's a myth they believe. But they do those things because they really do, like they have the emotional commitment to saying that this is important. And they've taken those steps because they think that's helping. So it's fascinating to me how many people said that our research this year said 37% of people keep a password notebook. And that was consistent in the organizations I spoke to this October when they invite us in to speak, even some large government agencies where people should know better.
Well, based on my conversations with red teamers that I communicate with on a regular basis, many of the times that they are able to compromise an environment is because they find passwords in a file, either on a share or on an admin's workstation. So that seems pretty consistent across people, even those who should know better.
It would be safer in a physical book. And just as a quick aside, I was on Amazon the other day, not looking for password notebooks, but they do. It was just like one of the people who bought this also buy this. And one of them, like, there's a whole business of these password notebooks, credential notebooks that are designed to look like
Office Depot. Yeah.
It's like the cat, the dog, birds, like they have all these, as if that's hiding the fact that it's a password notebook. And some of them have
I take your point that
views on them.
I take your point that like the physical access, seems like it's a remote possibility that somebody would get a hold of it physically. But what I don't like about it is the recovery. If somebody got a hold of it, if you took it to you can't tell me that nobody ever takes their password notebook to a coffee shop or on vacation with them, right? If you lost it, can you imagine trying to recover from, if somebody got a hold of that, can you imagine trying to recover from all of those? Like if somebody had your accounts and changed all your, MFA and changed, like made it impossible for you to get control of your own account again, like it'd be a nightmare.
Yeah, it would be awful. Agreed. Sorry, Sean. I just had to throw that in there because, just seeing the number of reviews, 6,000 to 10,000 reviews on some of these things, like clearly they're selling a lot of these.
Yeah, and absolutely. My dad was big on writing his passwords in a little book that he had, and I got him shifted over to a password manager, and he still had some trouble with that. So there are some areas that to get better at and help people understand things, because they can write in a book, whereas using a tool to input things and then have it fill it out, and there's got to be a browser extension or something else, can be a little more complicated depending.
Yeah, I've been paying for a 1Password family account for 5 years now, pretty much ever since they've had the family plan, and I've yet to successfully get any of my family members to use it.
Well,
so I think it goes back to Lisa's point about, engagement and repeating, because you say it once, people won't do it. That's it right there.
So our trick was when our kids went away to college, we changed the Netflix password, and we said that, and it took like an hour for the text to come, like, "Hey, Ma, what's the new Netflix password?" And we said, "Well, if you want it, it's in that LastPass thing that we had you install on your phone that you're not using."
That is brilliant. I love that.
The other thing I tell people a lot is, I think people have this impression that they have to lose like a whole Saturday afternoon sitting down and putting everything in there. You know what? Put 5 or 6 important financial services accounts in there, and then just install it on your browser and let it run. And it'll ask, you get that prompt, do you want to add? And you just click yes, and you keep rolling. And I just think oftentimes, it feels like a monumental task, because we do have a gazillion accounts. And if we can bring it down to size and say, you know what, something's better than nothing. And that's another thing that a lot of security folks struggle with, is we really want people to do everything they need to do. Right. Well, sometimes it's better just to get people to take the first step and to do something instead of doing nothing.
Yeah, I think often as an industry, we try for that 90, 95, 100% solution, when really if we can make it 40% better or 50% better, that is monumentally better than what it was before.
Yes.
If you can stop using the same password for your bank account that you use for Facebook, that's one step. The next step is using something where you could use a better password through something like a password manager. Absolutely.
Yep.
So, Lisa, you've described your current job with the National Cybersecurity Alliance as a dream job. I want to cover a little bit about like what your role is there and what the mission of the National Cybersecurity Alliance is, and what you do there.
So I guess we're most known for being the co-founders of Cybersecurity Awareness Month, along with CISA. But our mission so we've been doing that for around 20 years now. But our mission is to empower a more secure, interconnected world. So it's really around education, whether it's small businesses. We have a program called Cybersecure My Business, or awareness campaigns like Cybersecurity Awareness Month in October, Data Privacy Week coming up in January. We're doing some work to close the workforce gap and to improve diversity in cybersecurity. We have a program that we call See Yourself in Cyber. It's a program working with historically Black colleges and universities. And we have, as part of that, we have on-campus events that are like little mini security job fairs. And then we also have a mentorship program that anybody can sign up to be a part of. If you go to staysafeonline.org, under programs and events, you'll see the HBCU career program, and there's instructions there on how to sign up to be a mentor. So we're asking people just to give an hour a month of their time to mentor a young person who's interested in a career in security, privacy, or risk. And we've got quite a few people that are in there having meetings every day with their mentees. So that's really cool to see. And then we're going to add a scholarship. We've partnered with One in Tech Foundation, which is an arm of ISACA, a nonprofit ISACA started to give away some of their money. It's a foundation, and we've partnered with them to add a scholarship aspect to our HBCU program. So we're pretty excited about that. That's brand new. But it's mainly most of our programs all revolve around educating people. So I talked about people like my kids and my mom. We have a series on our YouTube channel called Mom Don't Click That, which is a video series that I made in my last role when I was on the board of the NCA, and we donated them to the NCA. And it's a series of interviews with security professionals and their aging parent, and a comedian who's since been on Colbert. He moderates the conversation, and it's super cute. It gives you a lot of empathy for that older person and their struggles with security. Some of them are success stories. Some of them are pretty funny stories that could have gone all wrong, but didn't. And those are nice to share with like your aging relative, because it's, they're hearing a story from somebody else, their same demographic. We've got animations, we've got animated infographics. The biggest cohort we have in our database are people running training and awareness programs at organizations all around the world. So they get into our database and they get emails when we have free materials available, when we make new material available, and they can download that, and it's all free to use. You can plagiarize to your heart's content. We have suggested articles and suggested social media posts, like things you can put on Slack in your company, but you can edit them to sound or look more like your brand, and it's all free. So we have a lot of materials that help feed people's training and awareness programs around the world.
And we have those links in the show notes. So check out the show notes if you want links
and
to.
You can download Behave as well, the research report.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we have time for one more question. Sean has a good question, I think, to wrap the conversation on.
Absolutely. Thanks, Adrian. So Lisa, what do you think is one training element or takeaway that you feel is key for cybersecurity awareness? I guess this might be kind of a loaded question. I put this together before we started, but you've talked about basically being empathetic, engaging with people, continuing that. So maybe this is more a question around what do you think is the most important part of cybersecurity awareness?
A lot of it is that language of making it sound like something you want, not something you hate. Right. I would say, so there's an advertising guru out there named Seth Godin, and I quote him all the time. He's written books, and he's just a thought leader in the space. And one of my favorite quotes from him is, "Facts don't change people's behavior, emotion changes people's behavior." So when you spend all your time getting your facts right in your training and awareness program, but you don't spend time thinking about what the emotional appeal is, how you're going to connect to people, are you using storytelling? Are you using humor? What are you doing that's going to want to make people read beyond the headline, beyond the title, beyond the subject line of the email? Like, why should they keep reading? Why should they engage? Why does this matter to them? I think a lot of us could spend more time on that aspect of just, thinking about how we're going to leverage emotion so that we can motivate people to actually take action on the we're delivering the capability, the knowledge, and people generally have opportunity to do things. We have to remember it's that motivation piece that's hard, and that's the emotional piece. So don't forget about that, because that's a really big factor in actually achieving behavior change.
That's great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like for those of you that are on the audio, you get to see Adrian mouthing words left and right, and no sound is coming out. But I think he fixed it, and his face says it all. So cut back to him; his face says it all.
Let me. Yeah. So my excuse is I got the flu pretty bad, influenza A, and it's left me with a lingering cough. So I'm often clicking the mute button here, and this was the one time I forgot to unclick it.
Adrian, I can't let this go. Adrian, is that the Canadian flu?
The Canadian
influenza?
Flu?
Yeah, influenza A.
Oh my God! Wow. And on that note, Lisa, thank you so much for joining us on Enterprise Security Weekly today.
It was my pleasure.
I almost got through it without screwing up, but you were fantastic. Lots of good, actionable advice. Some great links for people to follow up on. I think I'm going to check out the mentoring thing. I love opportunities to mentor and to talk to people about security. I go talk to the high school. Actually, near me has a cybersecurity class, and I go talk to that class every semester. So great stuff. I urge other folks, if you have stuff to teach, do some kind of volunteering, do some kind of mentoring here, because there's a lot of myths out there that need your help to fix those and correct those. So thank you again, Lisa, and we'll be right back in a few moments with the weekly enterprise news.
Attacks can't be prevented, but they can be stopped. Modern cyber attackers have already made it inside your network, but you have the upper hand. Find and eradicate threats with ExtraHop network detection and response, and shut them out before real damage is done. Learn the advanced techniques attackers are using and how ExtraHop stops them with a live attack simulation. Register at securityweekly.com/ExtraHop. That's extra HOP.
Managing and protecting the world's grueling number of endpoints, enabling Tanium's customers to see, control, and protect every endpoint everywhere. Tanium's mission is to provide certainty in uncertain times with the industry's only converged endpoint management. Trusted by the U.S. military and the majority of the Fortune 100, Tanium helps manage and protect nearly 30 million endpoints. Tanium, the power of certainty. Visit securityweekly.com/Tanium to learn more. When it comes to cybersecurity, the biggest threats are the ones you never see coming. SecureWorks detects and responds to cyber attackers' ever-changing tactics. We come armed with Taegis, a security analytics platform designed to recognize attacks and stop them before they do harm. SecureWorks, defending every corner of cyberspace. Learn more at securityweekly.com/SecureWorks. Welcome back to Enterprise Security Weekly. You can now find us on Instagram. Follow us for highlight reels, giveaway announcements, and more at SecWeekly. Yeah, I've been trying to engage with SecWeekly a little bit on there. I've been seeing those pop up. And now for the Enterprise Security Weekly News. You can check out securityweekly.com/ESW299 if you want to follow along, or check out any of the links that we are going to talk about today, or maybe choose not to talk about. Sometimes we don't get to all the funding items, for example, but not a ton of stories for today. I believe there should be, we should have 15 on there. I added some late for my co-host. If you might need to refresh if you're not seeing 15, but there should be 15. And first one, Tyler, I thought it was pretty interesting seeing, I think it's been a while since we've seen a big round and valuation attached to it. So I thought it was super interesting seeing both in this case with Drata here. What do you think?
Yeah, this is a big one. This is a big one. 200 million Series C co-led by Iconic and GGV Capital. 2 billion valuation. I think up from 1 billion last time. I didn't dig into the previous. Yeah, up from 1 billion last time. So yeah, I mean, listen, to double your valuation in the down economy and in a world where the majority of cyber and high growth startups, high tech, high growth startups are taking 50% cuts, to double is absolutely out of control and amazing. Good for them. And here's the thing, like, we're in a world now where it's no longer about looking at just your potential for growth and giving you some kind of massive multiple on forward-looking revenue. Now, investors are saying, what's your path to profitability? What's your path to getting to high margins? What's your path to cash flow efficient growth of a business, right? And so I can't imagine that Drata got 200 million on a Series C with a 2 billion valuation unless they deserve it, right? It's kind of a difficult thing to get in today's market. So good for them for raising this.
Yeah, and they're the one that made them a unicorn was a $100 million Series B round, which is also just massive for a Series B. And I believe they're competing with the likes of Vanta, basically helping you get compliant more quickly, get your SOC 2 more quickly. Sounds like they don't really lean on SOC 2 here, though. They talk more about PCI DSS, GDPR. They say they've got 14 plus frameworks here, but it's certainly a slog, and something that people have traditionally done in spreadsheets. So definitely, I think a place in the market, opportunities in the market for this.
And there's a big need for it too. I mean, they do list SOC 2, ISO 27001, HIPAA, GDPR, PCI, DSS. I mean, these are all things that are starting to be required by contract. So now when you do a contract with a big company, they are going to want to see SOC 2 or ISO 27001 compliance, or at least something along those lines, which makes a lot of the third-party vendor work easier. And so with those requirements, companies are starting to move in that direction if they haven't already. So something like Drata, if they're able to automate that or make it easier, because that's always a slog, as you said, then there's money in it. And I think it makes sense.
The other thing I'll point out, Adrian, is how we're always poking fun at crappy press releases on funding rounds and how half the time you don't understand what the hell's going on. It's just a buzzword bingo. This is the right way to do it. Please click on the link and go to drata.com blog/announcing-series-C. They literally just take a very direct approach. Here's what we're raising. Here's what our valuation is. Here's the strategic players that are involved. Why now? And what's next for Drata? How are we going to put this money to work? And it's just a really straightforward blog post. I love the way they approach this. I mean, they have 8 to 10 well-known VCs / angels / individual strategics that are backing them on this thing. It feels like it's a healthy round, but I mean, you never know until you get into the covers, peel back the cap table and the dollars. It's tough. Yeah. It's tough to know exactly whether it's a good round or not.
I mean, it seems like they've had a lot of traction. They name drop some customers. And honestly, it's a value prop that's really easy to understand, right? I think that's part of the magic of this is that it's not that magical, right? Like there isn't really any magic. It's like people are doing this with email and spreadsheets. It really sucks. It takes a lot of labor to do it, and we make it suck less.
Yep. I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah, but yeah, good point on it being an excellent press release. Pretty long press release, covers a lot of ground, but yeah, there's no having to look up buzzwords or Gartner acronyms or anything like that here.
Yeah, the only other thing that I want to point out is potential nepotism in there. I just noticed. Recently, they announced Adam Aarons joining Drata as CRO and Tony Markovitz becoming COO, which is interesting given Adam Markovitz, CEO and co-founder. So that's kind of interesting that I don't know if Troy is a co-founder or a late addition, but certainly they're keeping it in the family.
Yeah, there's a couple of cases of that. There's the Orions, right? Behind, supposedly
Tanium.
security's largest unicorn, Tanium. Yeah, which is a father-son team.
Yep.
We've got a few other fundings here. Sean, I don't know if you have an opinion on the, I thought it was kind of bold. The title they have here, Hyper, the leader in phishing resistant MFA. Like it's not just MFA anymore. Now we need phishing resistant MFA.
Hey, Sean, I gotta
MFA
ask,
that actually works.
Hey, Sean, I got to ask, isn't that like, I don't know the word I'm looking for. It's not oxymoronic, but certainly is it like a doubling situation? Isn't all MFA supposed to be phishing resistant?
I don't know that it's supposed to be. I think we've definitely seen that it has not been. Certainly from an MFA perspective, there's a couple of issues with MFA, generally speaking. One is that someone can often be in the middle of that request and what the actual answer is. So basically you end up with the answer, the response to the answer, but it gets ported through another thing. So the attacker actually has the session. FIDO2 is really supposed to be the solution around phishing of credentials and MFA, because it's not replayable. It's not something that you can just send back over to the server. What I'm seeing here is with Hyper, they're talking about passwordless. So I think they're based on what I see in the PR write-up, it's probably something that uses FIDO2 or similar behind the scenes in order to provide this passwordless solution, because that's what's been embraced by some of the largest vendors, such as Microsoft, Amazon, Google, Facebook, etc.
All right. So, yeah, that's a $25 million Series C1. I don't think I've ever seen a number on the end of a C round or any round before. So I don't know, does that imply a C0 or a C2 is coming?
Great question. Tough to know. And not only that, 25 million tends to be on the smaller side for Cs traditionally, although given the compression in the market, that may become the norm, a little bit smaller on the C rounds.
Yeah, it's an order of magnitude smaller than Drata's Series C, which is the first one we talked about.
Yep, and I think both are outliers, Adrian, right? I think Drata's is an absolute insane high-end outlier, and this is likely on the lower side. There's probably a little bit of a normalization somewhere between the two.
Yeah. All right, we've got some Web3 security here, which I'm not sure it's really proven that Web3 is even going to be a thing. So, I think maybe a little bit premature to have Web3 security, but hey, here it is. It got $8 million in funding.
I don't know what to make of this. I wish I knew more about Web3. I feel like such a uneducated person on what constitutes Web3 as far as like what the difference is between Web2, Web3 from a security perspective. So I can't really comment on it other than it's, this one's specifically designed for Web3 security platform for the centralized, decentralized finance and smart contract application working via detection and interception of crypto attacks and blockchains. What?
Yeah.
What?
So, I mean, my take is look, decentralized crypto, smart contracts, all that stuff. There's just but see, the problem always comes back to, like, if you're detecting shady stuff in Web3, what if it's all shady? Like, how do you detect it then? Or like the whole, like an FTX situation, like the whole thing's a rug pull. Like it becomes difficult to detect shady transactions when they're all fundamentally shady. So that's where I kind of get stuck here on how you do this kind of thing. I'm sure there's some patterns that are no-brainers, that you want to maybe automatically block or put, like, I mean, it seems like fraud, right? Like this is fraud, but for crypto stuff, right? Anti-fraud stuff.
I honestly can't even tell. Doesn't even seem like English. Maybe they forgot an Oxford comma that's thrown me off. I'm not exactly sure, but it's just.
I think it's more than an Oxford comma. It's a little bit more than an Oxford comma.
Maybe they're using not even English. I really don't know. But to be honest with you, when I read this thing, I'm just confused. And maybe it's a PR fail. If it is, Cybers, please go, rewrite this thing and put it out in plain English so that the rest of us can understand it. Hopefully you got something here, guys. I don't know.
Yeah, I haven't seen more of Web3 than a concept, and a lot of the things that I've seen around Web3 have not been successful concepts based on a website that tracks Web3 fails. So it is very much built around the crypto industry and what folks are doing in that. I haven't seen a good reason for Web3 versus even blockchain. So we'll see.
And the next one here, Nucleo is developing a multi-sig blockchain infrastructure security protocol that will allow new organizations to move on-chain.
What? Like, please just state it in plain English. I mean, it's ridiculous. I don't know.
Non-custodial multi-sig Ethereum-based blockchain infrastructure.
Maybe I'm the idiot, Adrian. I hear that stuff and I just get so hyper confused. And then I realize I'm a fairly well-educated, well-experienced person who's been around the cyber world for 25 years. I'm supposed to at least get it, because if I can't get it, I can't imagine what other people are feeling.
Yeah. I'm just surprised there's still, these aren't huge rounds that we're seeing here. These are very small rounds, but I'm surprised any money is still getting thrown at it here. It's just, so much has been called into question, like so many huge foundational chunks of crypto has just shown that it's not very stable.
Yeah, and I'm with Tyler. A lot of it reads just like a bunch of crypto keywords. The platform leverages the popular zero-knowledge cryptography and advanced multi-signature to allow organizations to take advantage of Web3-based capital allocation and management systems. Sounds fantastic. Sign me up.
What? And at the end of the article, and this isn't part of the article, it's part of the website, which is nftgators.com. It says, sign up to the world's biggest crypto exchange, Binance, to buy and sell cryptocurrencies.
Yeah, that's just screaming FTX to me. Not interested. Full pass.
But wasn't Binance the one that actually did full pass on purchasing FTX?
Yes, they were. They were the hard pass. We gotta have, Gus. We gotta have like a hot button for there's a I forget what cartoon, like Simpsons or something, where the character says what? We need to have a hot button for that, for these kind of press releases.
Some sound bites. We can.
Oh my gosh, yes. This totally deserves one of those sound bites.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Coinbase, I forget the name of the guy behind Coinbase, is the only one that ever sounds like he's talking any sense.
Brian Armstrong?
Yeah, Brian Armstrong. Yeah. And early on, like, he went after, he's like, please regulate the shit out of us. Like
please. They make it safe.
They have independent auditors come in and say, they actually have one-to-one funds, for customer funds stored with Coinbase. But outside that, like, I don't, almost none of it seems trustworthy. And I've got various crypto and things, and I never see an opportunity to use it. It has very little utility to me. The main utility of crypto is news items at this point. It's like car crash, squirrel stories, kind of like look how ridiculous look at the latest ridiculous thing that's happened.
Oh, and just think about it. Coinbase is probably the one that was the closest to being on the up and up and doing very well. And they were at a high of, I I want to say roughly 350, like 340 something. And they're currently sitting at $42 a share. So talk about a massive dump in value.
Yeah. Yeah. It's I mean, it's pretty common though, like a dump in value that much. We saw a lot of that. It wasn't just crypto, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, yes, the high-tech, high-growth dumped in value from 50 to 70%, but this is pushing 90%, Adrian. This is a massive dump.
Yeah. A massive dump. All right, moving on.
That needs some graphics.
Oh, no, it doesn't. Yeah, maybe just a poop emoji.
Yes, there you go.
So Milton Security rebranded Threat Hunter AI. I think they used to do NAC, and then they became I think they're like an MDR firm, MSSP MDR. So it was interesting seeing a rebranding going on here. And this is a bootstrapped company, so it's like typically you don't see a whole lot of rebranding because M&A is just so active in security. You know, you end up getting acquired before you even have a chance to rebrand.
Generally, when I'm advising companies, I always tell them don't rebrand. You're going to lose whatever traction you've got to date. However, this particular one, the name Milton Security made me think of like, I don't know, like a Brinks security truck. It was just a really poor name. So I think from a brand perspective, they were right in rebranding to threathunter.ai. I think it makes a whole lot of sense. The only other one I can think of with a reasonably recent rebrand was when White Source went to Mend a few years back, which I never understood why they did that.
Wait, I thought they were the ones that rebranded as Human.
No, they went to Mend Secure, or just Mend.com or something.
Which one rebranded as Human? It was like humans.ai or something like that.
Yeah, well, the thing that killed me about the whole White Source thing is they had been in market for over 10 years and built up so much brand on the term White Source that for them to switch to Mend had to be some massive reason.
I can't find it, but somebody rebranded as Human or Humans AI, and apparently it didn't work that well. I can't even. Yeah, White Ops. It was White Ops reintroduces itself as Human. What did you say? You said White Source.
White Source rebranded as Mend a year or two ago.
As Mend. So that's why I was confused. It was White Ops, which was I think Dan Kaminsky was the founder there.
It was Dan's company. Yep.
Yeah, and they rebranded as Human, all caps Human, which I thought. Well, as I just demonstrated here, it was really hard to find. Like that was like the 18th result I had to scroll down to finally find that. Yeah, and I think that they were anti-bot, as in like bots that infect your websites and stuff like that.
Interesting.
Yep. Let's see. Moving on. I thought it was. I'm not sure there's a whole lot to talk about here, except I'm just kind of waiting to see the fallout. But number 7, Germany, apparently after 2 years of negotiation, basically said, we just don't see any way that Microsoft 365 can be legal under GDPR. And so it's technically illegal to use Microsoft 365 in Germany. And if it is in Germany, then, it's not anywhere else in the EU or anybody else who follows GDPR. So like this sounds like a huge, like a very disruptive thing, but I can't imagine companies are moving off of Microsoft 365.
So I'm going to ask you, Adrian, like, sometimes you see these things and they're done just for stupidity reasons at a government level, and they never get truly enacted. They never get enforced. People are like, okay, that's ridiculous. We're going to use it anyways. Is that, do you think, happening here where people are like, okay, great, it's banned. We don't care. We use it anyways because it's the best tool for the job?
Sorry, say that again.
So the question is, sometimes you see these enforcements and regulations at a government level. In the U.S., you have them occasionally. You can't do X. And everybody's like, okay, great, but it's the most ridiculous law ever. So we're just going to ignore it and do X anyways, right? And so do you think that I think this might turn into one of those kinds of scenarios where Germany and then potentially France say, hey, we don't think it's safe, we don't think it's secure. And literally all the businesses go, there's no other better option. This is the best tool in market. We are going to use this.
Right. Yeah,
I think it forces this scenario. It forces the situation where it doesn't matter what you regulate. We're going to do what we think we have to do from a business perspective.
Well, I mean, it's we've talked about Uber a lot and how Uber was always illegal when it operated. Like almost everywhere Uber spun up its services, it was illegal to do so in that area, and they counted on becoming so popular, that they would push the laws to get changed. And for the most part, that worked out pretty well for them. They were able to get popular enough, quick enough, that lawmakers just changed the laws rather than try to find them. Notably in Europe is one of the places where that didn't fly. That didn't work for them. And Uber does some food delivery and stuff like that, but there are still some countries. And I think there are even still some states in the U.S. and a few other places here and there, certain cities where the government just put their foot down and said, nope, that's not going to fly here.
But the problem is this is the first domino, right? So if you read the article that's linked in our feed there, it says it even goes so far as to say that Windows might be next. Germany's Federal Office for Information, BSI in German, has already expressed concern that Windows 10 and 11 operating systems collect telemetry data, including typing data and even speech to text, which would then make them in violation as well. Which, in response, German and French public schools, the public school system, has switched to Linux operating systems and other Office 365 alternatives for their educational needs. So they're even going so far as to say Windows might be too much. This feels like a way overstepped bounds by the government.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. It's I think it's a mistake to assume that this is going to correct itself. Certainly, there are services, their entire cottage industries in Germany just because of Germany's data residency laws. So you'll see entire Dropbox competitors, for example, that only exist because this data residency law exists in Germany.
Sure, I can see that, Adrian, but now we're talking about an underlying operating system. We're talking about a fundamental operating system, one of the most frequently used OSs in the world.
I mean, it's been happening for a while. I mean, they're not the best examples, but Russia and North Korea dropped Windows a while ago.
Wow, I can't imagine Germany being that aggressive.
Adopted their own brand of Linux or their own distros, basically. But yeah, no, we've seen governments before. I mean, it's small things here and there where we see governments officially adopt Linux. I've been seeing those over the last couple of decades. But this is quite a bit bigger. Because this is GDPR. This is EU wide. It's 28 countries. So. Yeah, and they said the Microsoft 365 bans spread to France. So already there's another country that's gone along with Germany and EU country.
And according to the article, there's concerns about it also affecting U.S. companies, Apple, Google, Amazon, so not just Microsoft even.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, Apple just changing their, how they handle ads on the apps and allowing, cross app monitoring, huge percentages in ad revenue impact to Facebook and Twitter and other social companies there. So it's really interesting. I mean, obviously Apple's a private company, but I see similar impacts here, where, legislation and regulation can suddenly have a huge impact on the market. But yeah, it seems like something where it'd be interesting to have somebody come on that understands this stuff a little bit better. Because honestly, I don't really understand this well enough to see the future path. I've got to imagine Microsoft is doing backflips, currently, like trying to fix this, trying to undo this ban. All right, moving on. So the other big thing I wanted to talk about today was AI, and it's funny because on the one hand, I wrote like a mini essay. I'm sure you can see here, but on the one hand, AI has been kind of a joke, right? Like you've got all these people talking about how amazing the future is going to be because of AI, and then, when people bring it up, we think about robots, falling into ponds, and, we think of videos we've seen with, Scottish people trying to use an Amazon Echo that's been trained on like a UK voice model. That was actually something I found out really early on with the Amazon Echo, was that like I wanted it to talk to me with a British accent, so I changed it, not realizing that it also changes the AI, the ML model for recognizing speech, also to UK. So if I don't speak, I basically had to speak in a British accent for it to understand.
Oh my God, please record that. Please record that. Please send us audio of that.
That was something I was like, wait a minute, like, why is it not recognizing anything I'm saying? And then it dawned on me, like, the model goes both ways. Like, it's not just changing the speech model, but it changed the language recognition model as well, because you have a different one for each locale. And obviously they didn't have a Scottish one, so those. You can find those videos. You don't need a video of me.
No, I 100% need a video of you attempting to speak with a Scottish accent to your Alexa or your Google system. And then we need to air that live on next week's Squirrel Story.
I don't know. I might need some more convincing. I might need a
couple bourbons.
A couple bourbons, definitely.
There you go.
But yeah, it's kind of gone from a joke to all of a sudden, we've got AI generating these incredible images, and then they turn to text. ChatGPT came out, and I think it went, I think it was like 14 days or 20 days. It went from like being opened up to the public to having 1 million active users.
Yeah, one of which is me.
Yeah. I mean, everybody's just diving into it, saying, "Hey, what can we do with this?" And
so funny enough, I was actually doing a little bit of research on this for my newsletter I put out every Friday. So I asked ChatGPT, I asked it point blank. I said, "Will ChatGPT take over creative writing?" And its answer was just amazing to me. It said, "It's unlikely that ChatGPT or any other language model will take over creative writing. While ChatGPT and other language models can generate text that is convincing in some respects, they are not capable of the kind of creativity and originality required for truly great writing. Creative writing requires a human touch, and it is something that machines are not capable of replicating." And I thought that was such a perfectly AI answer.
Yeah, it's a great way to say there's nothing to see here. Don't worry about us. We're not going to take over your job or anything else. It'll be
until
okay.
We do.
We're AI. We're here to help.
But some of the examples I've seen are astonishing, though. Like if you do ask it something like, "Why should I be a CISO?" The result is good enough. You could publish it as a blog post, and I don't think anybody would blink an eye and guess that was written by an AI. Gives a excellent response to it. Also saw like people using it to draft contract language. So specifically like in the state of Nevada, I need a contract for a property agreement. And like you give it this very specific requirements, and it'll just spit out the legal legal language. I was
I'm super impressed with what it can create, and I think, at the end of the day, it's going to be I think it's going to be one of those situations where it takes away a lot of the low-hanging fruit, right? It gives us the ability as human beings to move to the higher order, difficult problems and leave the small problems behind. So a couple things on it. It feels to me like, okay, we're at the invention of the assembly line back when cars were being assembled, right? Well, we just went from 1 car a day to 100 cars a day. Does that mean the world will no longer have jobs and everything's going to fall apart? No, it doesn't mean that at all. It just means that we won't be the ones hand assembling cars anymore. And I think that's really what will happen here. The other thing is, I was having a conversation today with someone actually who said that they went to the ChatGPT/OpenAI Discord, and there's a channel on there, and he said, if you want to have a good Saturday night, grab a bourbon or two and sit there and watch the output of what people put into ChatGPT. It's absolutely amazing, the types of questions that they're asking right now. It's mind-blowing.
It's astonishing. There's a few more examples I want to throw out there. So Recon InfoSec every Thursday has kind of like a 30-minute Zoom call they do where they do some kind of education on something. And today they were just showing stuff they were doing with ChatGPT, and like one of them, somebody basically just pasted a command line execution in there and said, "What does this command do? Is it malicious?" And it comes back and says, "This command is likely malicious as it attempts to disable security settings, download and decode a certificate, and execute a file. The command will likely download and execute malware on the system, allowing an attacker to gain access to the system."
Wow.
That's
and then
impressive.
after that, they said create a Sigma rule that can be used to detect mimikatz, and it properly formats the code for a Sigma rule that will detect mimikatz.
That's fantastic.
They're specifically asking it. Another one, build me a Simplify manager, and Simplify is a company that makes a SOAR product. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a SimSOAR. Yeah.
Yeah. Build me a Simplify manager that works with OpenAI instead of email rep, and boom, it spits out Python code.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I've been very impressed with what the chat system has been able to put out as far as writing PowerShell or writing Python code to do certain things. I mean, I definitely see 2023 is going to be the year of ransomware generated by systems like this, and that's insane.
Wow.
So to come around full circle, like AI and ML have been buzzwords in the security space for so long, and outside of like next gen AV, most of it that I've experienced that I've played with has failed spectacularly. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, ChatGPT is out for 2 weeks, and people are like replacing, recs. Like I'm not sure we need this rec open anymore.
I mean, college professors are tweeting out about how the college essay is dead now. Like, you cannot tell students to write an essay on comparing and contrasting 2 different famous people, or talking about issues with a certain thing that happened in history. College professors have been grading it anywhere from a C to an A, and saying this changes everything.
Oh, it's 25 years too late. I may have done way better in undergrad if this existed when I was there.
Right.
Yeah, it's just I hate doing predictions, but I think we're going to see some people do some really interesting stuff with this. In fact, somebody I work with was saying, "Hey, can we use this to write the text for some of the rules that we put together, because we just need like general, like we've got like 500 different rules. How do you remediate this alert that we give you, this security issue that we give you?" And you can just ask ChatGPT, and it gives a perfect answer on how to remediate it. And we have some language gaps too. We've got some Brazilian folks that it's clear when they write something that they're not a native English speaker, and this cleans all that up. So I'm not sure if we can legally use it. They do have some commercial, some pricing models for commercial use for this, but I think it's going to be really interesting to see Because a lot of these jobs, these are things that suck. Like we've got over 500 rules that have to be maintained, updated. Google Cloud and Amazon are going to change like where things are in the UI when you click things. So that has to be updated, and it's going to suck for somebody to one by one go through 500 rules and make sure that they're accurate. But if we can have an AI do it, man, that's a game changer.
Yeah, and this is so much better than the story time for children generation we talked about last time.
Yeah. Yeah, that's for sure. 100% entertainment. I still intend to have that generate an ESW story for us.
Oh, for sure.
All right, yeah. I think Sean, you wanted to talk about the BMC stuff.
Yeah, this Eclipsium thing is pretty incredible. I got whiff of this a little while ago, and I was working with a customer earlier this year about helping them better secure their environment from a admin force and Active Directory environment. And one of the things that we were able to identify is going after IPMI, which is interesting. It's the Intelligent Platform Management Interface. So IPMI is effectively a computer in the computer in your typical servers that enables remote management control. Effectively, this is the integrated lights out or ILO with HP systems, iDRAC with Dell. Every server manufacturer out there has some sort of lights out or BMC is another term for what that circuitry level is at the bottom level. So you have your hardware, you have the BMC, which is a baseboard management controller. You have IPMI that's incorporated into that, and then you have the different vendors that are using their own kind of layer to connect into that. But what's interesting about the BMC, the IPMI system, all these acronyms, is ultimately it provides access to the server hardware. So direct access to the NIC, direct access to the processor, maybe not the processor, but into the system that the processor is operating on, but direct access to memory. And so there's these critical vulnerabilities that Eclipsium worked on and getting released and coordinated across all these vendors to get fixed before even announcing it. And a number of these are they're very serious. We're talking about arbitrary code execution, default credentials, user enumeration via API to figure out even what accounts are accessible through these systems. One of the biggest issues that we've seen for sure with IPMI systems is the only way you get them updated to current secure versions is through firmware updates. Now, I was a server admin for many years. I never updated firmware if I could help it, unless there was a hardware failure or something else. So you don't update firmware. You have servers out there that are 4, 5, 6, he's older than 6 years old. These things have critical vulnerabilities in the IPMI system. And what Eclipsium is talking about is that it's even worse than a specific IPMI instance like HP ILO or Dell iDRAC. This affects every server hardware vendor out there that has ever put out a server that people use. And when you think about this at the next level of how bad this could be, servers run cloud. We don't have direct access to it, but servers run on the cloud infrastructure. So you're looking at a situation that could potentially affect not just on-prem systems, but cloud. And I think this is just the beginning of what we're going to see around these sort of BMC vulnerabilities at the base hardware level, not even getting up to IPMI, which tends to be something that's customizable for the vendor itself. And so again, on-prem systems, we got to make sure that we update our firmware. This is something that's very important. If you don't have this on your list of things to do in the next couple of weeks, definitely check your server firmware, check your OEMs. This is important.
And the attack surface here, do you find that companies usually put this on, these on a separate management network? I know most servers have like a separate Ethernet port for connectivity to this, right?
Yeah, that's the designed method and approach, right? The challenge is that there's designed and reality. It's supposed to be out-of-band management, OOB. Right. The issue is that we've certainly seen that a lot of customers, especially on like Dell servers, they plug them in, it runs by default, it's just there on the network. And you, through a simple port scan, looking for the ports that ILO listens, connecting through a port scan for what HP ILO, Dell iDRAC, and the others, it's just a web server. So you just ping it with, a simple curl to whatever port that system's running on, and then you know what it's running on. And this could be a system that is actually running VMware that hosts, a number of servers in the environment. So there's different degrees of bad. This is one of the worst that it could be, which is attacking the hardware level of the computer that manages the computer, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is, certainly I can see ransomware campaigns using this. They're always looking for, anything you can use to take over somebody's system, to take away control to it. Certainly if you own it at this level, you can, I don't know if they would be packaging up custom firmware or anything like that, but certainly if you can maintain access to that, I could see some situations where it's very difficult to kick out an attacker here, or they can just use this access to brick systems. Yeah, I don't know if you have guest OS if or host OS access from this layer, but it almost doesn't matter, because you almost certainly have the ability to do maintenance with the hard disks themselves, wipe them,
and you typically get remote console access. So with remote console access, you can do whatever. And what's interesting about the article is it says that Redfish is the successor to traditional IPMI and provides an API standard for the management of a server's infrastructure and other infrastructure supporting modern data centers. Redfish is supported by virtually all major server and infrastructure vendors, as well as the OpenBMC firmware project. So we're talking about something here that is used by everybody. It's an API that's available. And as you mentioned, Adrian, this is supposed to be out of band. We're supposed to be putting these on management networks. The problem is a lot of the times they aren't. It's expensive. It's difficult to put these on a different network, to manage that with more Cisco routers or other switches that are another cost, and makes operations more challenging. So oftentimes these are running on that same production network, and that's a big challenge. Like I said, you scan for it, you notice it's there, you go after it, you compromise it through one of the vulnerabilities that are there, or a default password, as mentioned in the article, and it's off to the races for the attackers, because once they have hardware access to that server, they can do just about anything with it. They can pull memory. It's a little more challenging when you have the abstraction of a virtual server, such as VMware. But all you need to do is send a command to that virtual server, ESXi, for example, change the root password. Now you can hit it on the VMware side. Things get very, very interesting when you start attacking server hardware.
The other technical one that I found pretty interesting here, Sean, that I thought you might want to comment on is number 13. This bring your own file system, they're calling it BYOF technique, to crypto mining. And it's interesting because it's one of those things where they're just using just general open source software that's out there. But one of the things, I see it helping on two sides. So generally, as an attacker, you don't know exactly what kind of environment you're going to encounter. So the more like platform agnostic you can get with your attack tools, the better. Because you can be assured they're going to work no matter what you come across. And then the other, because this tool called proot, it basically creates a file system, allows you to run binaries within this. It's almost like creating a container and a host, right? And the other nice thing about it is evading detection, because I imagine unless you're looking for proot itself running, you're not going to have any visibility into what's happening within this container. And it's not a container. I shouldn't use the term container.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I definitely have to dig into this a little bit more to see what it is, because it talks about typical tools that are used on Linux. Certainly, an attacker could drop on a Linux box, a Windows box, a Mac box. There's lots of options in your modern corporate network these days. And based on what I'm reading here, it's very interesting because it's got, it seems like it's primarily Linux-based, but it'd be very interesting to see how this could port over to Windows and provide that kind of virtualized access to the Windows space in a similar way that happens in a non-Windows, a NIX space, such as something along the lines of Linux, Mac OS, etc. Just kind of scrolling through and looking at it. The whole
it
right
uses,
once run everywhere
it
is very
uses
interesting.
QEMU, which QEMU runs everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just so think of it as a VM, as somebody dropping a VM on a host. But QEMU is emulation; it's not virtualization. So again, it's going to run pretty much everywhere because any host can do emulation. Right. You wouldn't want to use a VM because only certain hardware has the right CPU features for you to be able to do para-virtualization.
Yeah, it's very interesting for sure. Definitely more reading for me to do.
So yeah, I thought that was interesting, and it should set off alarms, regardless. Like all of a sudden you've got QEMU running on a host. I just don't know if detection engineers have taken that into account, like if that's something that would pop up and alert somebody. All right, so our last two stories kind of go together. I think the Ireland moving to a 4-day work week, and they haven't officially moved yet. I don't think they just completed some trials with 4-day work weeks, and the title here is Ireland sees 100% success rating with 4-day work week trial, and it looks like Britain did a similar one, a 6-month trial where workers worked 4 days with no loss of pay, and it kind of brings to mind the what's it called? I'm going to blank on the name here, but it's the Parkinson's law, I think it is, where work expands to fill the time that it's given. So if you ask somebody to do a task and you give them 8 hours, they'll use those 8 hours. But if you give them that same task and ask them to finish it in 30 minutes, they might be able to also get it done in 30 minutes. So I don't know. I think generally companies aren't very good at understanding employee performance and productivity and what affects that productivity. So yeah, I think there's a lot of wasted time in with work schedules.
I agree totally, Adrian. My question on this, though, and I didn't read the actual research, I read the article only. How do you measure success? I mean, on a scale of 1 to 10, the average rating for the trial was 9.2. Oh, okay. Yeah. Like if you ask 100 American workers if they want every Friday off, it's going to be even higher than 9.2, right? It's going to be successful. So, how do you rate success is, I think, the biggest question. And they said they asked the companies themselves what the rating was. And, if it's 9.2 and the companies are happy with the results and they're willing to give us more time off, take it. You'd be stupid not to.
Yeah, they said all of the 12 participating companies are planning to continue with the 4-day week schedule.
That works for me.
Yeah. No, I have the same questions. Like how do you? I mean, it's I think 6 months is long enough to get good results, but yeah, again, a lot of it comes down to, and we saw a lot of this with the pandemic and people moving to remote work, where a lot of companies and management's inability to understand whether or not work is getting done, kind of exposed how bad I think we generally are at understanding productivity. There's an interesting book from Jason Fried and I forget the guy's DHH, is the other guy at Basecamp. Book called "It Doesn't Have to Be Crazy at Work," and it kind of goes into a lot of that stuff. Like this is something that they've thought a lot about where does work happen, how does it happen, how do traditional management and business practices get in the way of employees getting work done. So they go into that a lot. Like if you've got people going to meetings all the time, when the hell are they getting work done, right? Yep. I think there's a lot of myths and a lot of room for improvement in understanding how work gets done, what the right amount of work per day is. Like if you think people are doing 8 hours of work in an 8-hour workday, like there's absolutely no way. I can guarantee you, like you're lucky if you're getting 2 or 3 hours of actual productivity out of an 8-hour day.
And since the pandemic, a lot of people are doing 8 hours of meetings and then have to do work after that. So I wonder how that fits into it also. Like, okay, I didn't get any work done in my 36 hours or that I had to do the work in. Now I've got to go ahead and do them Friday afternoon. And that might just make people more upset.
Yeah. And so another recommendation there from the same person, from Jason Fried, he does a TED Talk. This is back from 2007, but I always recommend people go watch. It's like 16 minutes of your life. That is well worth it, I think. And it's called Why Work Doesn't Happen at Work. And he dives into all that in, meetings and managers. He calls them M&Ms, like they're the number one hit to productivity are the meetings and the managers. And this was the result of it. For years, he would ask people like, when do you get work done? Where do you get work done? And thinking about, okay, why does work happen in the evenings or early in the morning or on the weekends? And when you look at somebody's calendar, it's because that's when they have time to focus on things and get things done. And it's not when they're in an office sitting at a desk. So yeah, very interested in that. I might have to dive a little deeper into that and see, how structured this was in terms of understanding what, success means and how they measured that. So the squirrel story, also about workplace trends, and a little bit more specific to French work culture, which is different from other work culture. And the reason this is here is Katie actually mentioned this last week, and I told Katie on our Slack, you've got to. I need more information on this guy who was fired for not being any fun at work, and she sent me this, and so the link there you should be able to read behind the paywall here, which is slightly naughty on my part, I guess, but I'm using 12foot.io, but I mean, really, I'm not going to sign up for Fortune just to read this article. But yeah, it's interesting. Like, it's work culture is so different in different countries. Like I found out there's some significant differences in just employment law and how, the expectations of work culture in Brazil, because I work with a lot of Brazilian folks. And, we I think a lot of people joke about France, about the work culture there, how they, you ask them to work an extra day or an extra couple hours or something like that, and everybody riots. But yeah, I mean, coming from, we kind of have a toxic culture here, especially, being kind of the heart of, this kind of VC and startup culture, where, if you try to have any semblance of a life, if you're offline at all, you kind of get, you get the opposite or equal treatment. You get treated as if you're just not taking it seriously. Like, this isn't, startup culture means that you've got to put everything into it.
Yeah, I think it's a culture thing for sure. I think it's a definition of fun thing. Everybody's got a definition of what's fun, right? And if you read the article, there's commentary in there about managers allegedly encouraging nicknames and posting distorted and made-up photographs in the office. It meant to be fun, but what one person's fun might be another person's definition of, offensive or bullying or all sorts of different things, right? So everybody has a different view of fun. There's no way you can enforce. You have to have a fun culture. People are people. If they don't fit your culture, you don't have to hire them. At least not in the United States. But definition of fun is unique from person to person.
Yeah, and so I mean, straight out of this article, the defendant here argued that the company's fun culture was characterized by humiliating and intrusive expectations, like carrying out mock sexual acts and being obligated to share a bed with a colleague when traveling overnight for work. And wow.
Yeah, wow is right.
Yeah. So that's crazy. Yeah, and it's interesting, like what is deemed acceptable or not acceptable, in work culture and different companies. Like I often hear people who move to like the UK are just seriously underprepared for the drinking culture there. Like going out after work, it's funny because if you look at any breach database, like there's a significant chunk of left a laptop in a pub breaches in there, or left some company or enterprise data in a pub. Like pubs, search any breach database for pub, and under the category of accidental data loss, and there's a surprising amount of data that's been left in, people just going from work straight to the pub with their work laptop and work devices and forgetting them there.
Sign me up. I'm going to go drink more.
All right. Anything else you all want to add? Any thoughts before we wrap here on any of the news or any of our interviews today?
No thoughts on the news, Adrian. Just how much I love you, buddy. Thank you for putting this all together week after week.
Nothing here, and I agree with Tyler.
Next week is episode 300. I will be flying up to Rhode Island, and I understand we're doing like a big holiday thing next Wednesday as part of Paul's Security Weekly. So that's like an all-day thing. It goes from like noon to 8 p.m. And then I'll be doing Enterprise Security Weekly from the studio up there. It'll be my first time at the studio, so I'm really looking forward to that.
That's going to be a freaking blast. Everybody definitely tune in next week for both PSW and ESW next week. I think both are going to be great shows. We get to haze Adrian up in the studio. I'll make sure they give him a hard time and do all sorts of crazy things to haze him. And yeah, I think it'll be fun next week.
I'll be speaking in a British accent to voice assistants. I'll be smoking cigars.
Please record that. Please record that.
Oh man. Thanks so much, guys, for joining me today. Tyler and Sean, this has been great. Great interviews today. Love the feedback on the news items here. Thanks for being here with me. Thank you as always,
Adrian. You're a rock star.
Ditto.
And a big thanks to everyone watching or listening to this week's episode of Enterprise Security Weekly. And I believe next week's is going to be our last one for a while. Don't quote me on that, but it's certainly going to be a big one. So next week I'll see you from the studios up in Rhode Island. Have a good week, y'all.